Hello and welcome to Last Time Studios. So, how do I start with this? Men, 2022. We start the film off with a fairly standard set of scenes in which the charming Jessie Buckley has decided to take a solo holiday in a countryside retreat, which is a little posh to say the least. She meets the owner, Jeffrey, who shows her around the place. Jeffrey to me almost seems like an overtly comedic character and reminds me of the 90s Harry Enfield character Tim Nice but Dim. But this kind of explains itself later on in the film. In any case, things start to go awry, and our protagonist, Harper, played by Jessie Buckley, starts seeing and experiencing very strange things, and the film starts to divert into what I would have expected to be a standard horror, perhaps a psychological horror type film. But that's where I was sadly mistaken. We're then taken forward on a bizarre journey, and the oddities and freak show never really seem to stop from this point on in. I mean, on first glance or first watch of the film, you might think like, wow, like what on earth is going on here? Did the director just sort of go on some self-flating journey and decide to create a film with no sense of direction just for art's sake? Well, in short, no. The film's written and directed by Alex Garland. Alex has a series of what I can only describe as epic film, and for that matter, gaming releases in which he's credited for writing and some directing, i.e., 28 Days Later, Sunshine, Ex Machina. Yes, I realise that last one's not universally loved, but so what? I love it. And he even has some credits for the Devil May Cry outings, i.e., the excellent game series, if you're not a gamer. So, with that in mind, I thought I'd take a deep dive and explain what this film's about. Or should I say, what we think this film's about here at Last Time Studios. As on first watch, for probably quite a few of us watching, it's really difficult to get to the point of what's going on. Some things seem like they can be conclusively ironed out, but some points in the film draw quite differing opinions. I think that it's also very interesting to note that female to male also makes a big differential to the opinion. I've most definitely incorporated both here, just an FYI. I'd say spoiler alert at this point, but in honesty, even if you've not watched it yet, it'll hopefully give you a better viewing experience. Firstly, the religious, pagan, and social symbolism throughout the film was an absolute stroke of genius. In fact, if you're looking to understand what the film's about, I think we can break it down into three simple factors, three simple points. 1. Mythology intertwined with 2. Religion, and 3. Social connotations while dealing with trauma and control. I think we should start with the latter, that being the obvious message of control. From the beginning, men are trying to control Harper's character, that's beautifully played and powerfully played by actress Jessie Buckley. Yes, I've already said it, but I had to say it again. When she arrives at the cottage and meets Jeffrey's quirky character, which in honesty is disproportionately stereotypical of a posh English bloke, but still very competently performed by Rory Kinnear, we can see that he's very misogynistic to the point that he won't even let Harper get her own bags from the car, and when he's struggling badly, he still won't accept any offers to help. He also misstates her title as Mrs. a number of times, which seems quite deliberate. Then, as we begin to meet the other men in the village, who are in fact all played by Rory Kinnear, and as an additional point of note, Rory's performance, seems to increase throughout, becoming more concise and sinister. These men try to control her in different ways, following her, chasing her, or him as the boy trying to aggressively bully her when she won't play with him. Talking about the boy, I did make a mental note that it was really jolting in the first instance in which we see Rory's face deep faked onto a boy's body, made especially weird as he's first seen wearing a female mask, which he then takes off, which I think is supposed to be a depiction of Marilyn Monroe. It was just really jarring and absolutely disturbing. I'm not sure if it was an intentional decision or a budgetary one, but either way, I felt like I had to wash my eyes a little bit after seeing that. Absolutely terrifying. Anyway, I digress. Also, the priest tries to control her with fear and guilt. The priest was very interesting. I'll come back to him. Considering our protagonist's mind, man births man as she sees them. They're all the same face and they're all the same trauma. They're all James, her now deceased husband. Her husband tries to control her with threats of suicide and the use of religion to make her stay with him. Which now brings us to religion. Religion intertwined with mythology is definitely the subject here that's perhaps more of a challenge to link, depending on how religiously inclined you are. Let's start with the Green Man featured throughout the film. He's not just embodied in the rebirth of the naked character from yellow to green, but he's also featured as the figure on the fountain inside the church, shown on the opposing side of the Sheila McGig. The Green Man and the Sheila McGig are really poignant historical images, so the use of them in the film is very significant indeed. The Green Man is historically featured throughout the UK and Ireland, symbolising rebirth. And the Sheila McGig is again featured throughout the UK and Ireland on churches and stone architecture, usually to ward off evil, but also she was the goddess of fertility. Some of the Sheila McGigs are actually also quite graphic in their nature, so it's really interesting that they'd be built on some of these Christian churches dating back several hundreds of years. Well, as you can imagine, it's interesting for quite a few reasons. It's perhaps a subject for a whole other video, but I'll let you guys ruminate on that yourselves. Alex Garland brings focus to the use of apples, drawing parallels to Adam and Eve within the first 10 minutes of the film. Our protagonist takes an apple and bites it, which leads to Jeffrey making the comment, "Mustn't do that, forbidden fruit," which he then brushes off as a joke. The apple tree is focused on multiple times through the film. Also, you might say this is us looking into it way too deeply, but in a flashback scene with her husband, she also uses her Apple phone to send messages to a friend to find freedom from her oppressive partner, who used God, or as you might say, Christianity, as a rationale to stay together. At this point, I'm absolutely not trying to go hyper-religious. However, it's definitely worth mentioning that the use of red is also highly religiously symbolic and could be considered a signalling of the control of man through her perspective. For instance, there's a noticeable red hue when our protagonist has flashbacks to times when her husband's trying to control her, and the cottage is entirely decorated with red walls. What's the significance? Well, you could argue that red symbolises anger, which would be fitting. However, red letter edition Bibles show the words spoken by Jesus, commonly during his life on earth, all printed in red ink. So all the words spoken by Jesus are all in red. Adding to that, James, her husband's injuries, which are shown when she sees him dead, are parallel to the crucifixion. By that I mean the wrist, the head, the gash to the side, and the broken ankle, and of course his name's James, i.e. the King James Bible, although that link could be argued as very tenuous. Then we've got misogyny and religion coming into one, which it often still does, with the priest who approaches her and seems to be listening to help, but then has a completely misogynistic approach and pretty much tells her it's her fault James is dead and that she drove him to it. Then he basically says that men hit women sometimes, it's not nice, but it's not a capital offence. It's not painting a pretty picture of religion now at this point, is it? Throughout this interaction with the priest, to the left of the priest, or the right of the screen, there's a fallen crucifix against the wall in the shot. I can't help but think this is also symbolic, however, I'll leave this open to your interpretation, rather than trying to nail it down. There's a joke in there somewhere. So, let's recap. Men, to me, it's an exploration of our protagonist's process of dealing with trauma alone. She tries to run from it. But it's a reminder that, frankly, that's impossible. Sometimes you have to deal with trauma head on, and you can't break from the nightmare until you truly face what your trauma is. In the end, she had no choice but to face it head on. It shows that the isolation she tried to use for a coping method simply didn't work. She absolutely needed support, from a friend in this case, and I get the sense that towards the end of the film, her friend gives her the confidence to face her trauma. A truly inspiring and insightful and intricate story, if you're willing to open up to it. And yes, religion truly makes itself apparent, but not in a good way, as per usual. Let me have your thoughts. I've only scratched the surface here. So that's it for this week. Take care. I'll see you soon.